What if it's not just a disagreement? What if it's an argument? That doesn't ever happen, does it? None of you have ever been in an argument. It's only me, right? Well, of course, if I was the only one that got in an argument, then I would have to get in an argument with myself, so it has to be somebody else too, so I can blame you as well. We're told in Proverbs 15:1, a soft answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up what? Stirs up anger. Yeah. Harsh words stir up anger. Have you ever been in that situation? You've been around and maybe you were the one that was angry and somebody else's harsh word just made your anger worse. You are in conflict internally because you are outside of the law and you are outside of harmony with God. And as a God, you must try to subjugate other gods to your will and your way. And so you do that to God, you do that to people, you do it to animals, and so on. And anyone that does not comply with you must be convinced. They must be coerced or controlled, cast aside, canceled, or just cut off. And with this mindset, you assume that others think the same way that you do and are prone to do to you what you do to them. Therefore, you're always on guard against others, lest they attempt to get into your sphere like you get into theirs. And that is the foundation of conflict. And you can never be at peace unless all competition is eliminated, or it's sufficiently less powerful than you so that it's not a threat. So you can never be at peace unless everyone agrees with you. And if there's any disagreement, if there's any differing perspective, or if there's any question, and that is seen as a threat to your position, you react to it as a threat. And this always leaves you in a position of insecurity and reveals the weakness of your position. And this drives you to then use compulsion, coercion, force, manipulation, or lies and slander, cancel culture. We've seen a lot of that. And any other modality that you can think of that will work to maintain your position. And this condition of the human heart becomes manifested in groups. It's manifested in organizations and institutions and societies that are governed by humans with this condition. And so you see this cancel culture, you see this, canceling voices or pushing against things. You see this in all sorts of situations. And of course, over the last few years, we've seen lots of it. We've seen lots of people shut down, accounts shut down, silencing voices, other things of that nature. And it simply shows that the ones who are silencing and canceling have a weak position that cannot stand up against comparison. Right? They cannot have free dialogue because their position would be destroyed if there was free dialogue. Jesus didn't accuse, and he was fulfilling the role of a mediator, not of a judge. God will accuse because he is the judge, but God's accusations are always true. They are right. They are not false accusations. They are true accusations. He is seeking to save the sinner, if possible, but in the judgment, he will rightfully claim that you have done wrong. That's true. Now, if angels don't accuse, and Jesus, when he was falsely accused, he remained silent, and if when God accused, he proved the accusations wrong by his actions and not by his words, then how should we respond when we are falsely accused? Don't accuse in return. It doesn't ever work to turn around and accuse in return. Don't answer the accusation in words. Answer the accusation with actions, not words. Live a consistent life. Surrender to and depend upon Christ yourself. And your Christ-likeness in action will disprove the false accusation. Welcome, friends, to another episode of Truth for Life. Again, I'm Dr. Mark Sandoval with New Paradigm Ministries, and it's my pleasure to go on this journey with you to health and freedom. Today, we are going to look at the topic, resolving conflict. You ever had conflict? Have you ever had conflict? Have you ever had conflict? I think we've all been in a situation where we have had conflict, and sometimes it's difficult to understand how to react, act, respond, and so on in the context of conflict. So we're going to go over that. But again, we need to have a foundation that we work from. We need to have something that is unchangeable, that we take as our standard, to then evaluate other things by, and to see how they fit. So we're going, again, the fundamental law is that nothing exists or functions from itself, and nothing exists or functions for itself. Everything takes to give. Everything functions as a channel with an entrance and an exit, taking at the entrance, giving at the exit, and cause is at the entrance, effect is at the exit. I know you're thinking, wow, he keeps saying this over and over again. I know, because I want to keep it in your mind. We need to go over it again to remember what the very basics are, because if our foundation is not firm, nothing else that we build is going to be firm. A channel produces nothing of its own. It only has what it has while it's in the process of taking and giving, and the channel keeps nothing for itself. We see this in the law of God and the two tables of stone, the relationship with God and the relationship with others. The relationship with God is where I take, and I am dependent upon Him as my source. And the relationship with others is where I give. And since God is selfless, I take selfless love from Him, and I give selfless love to others. And that is love, taking to give, and that is how I function. Now, was Jesus ever in conflict? Okay, he was often in conflict. But did Jesus ever create conflict? No, he was not the creator of it, even though he was involved in it. So, how did Jesus respond to conflict? We should be able to learn from his example of how to respond in conflict. When Jesus was with Mary, she was trying to get him, she was in essence trying to blame him for the fact that they lost him for 3 days, and where did he go, and why wasn't he with them, and so on. And his response to Mary was, "Did you not know that I must be about my Father's business?" Right? There were some, we talked about it a few episodes ago of healthy boundaries, right? There's some healthy boundaries that's there for the purpose of his Father's mission. Now, when Jesus was with Satan and being tempted, his response to Satan was, "It is written." And finally, "The Lord rebuke you." And when Jesus was with his brothers, and his brothers were saying, well, if anybody's anybody, they're going to go to Jerusalem, because Jerusalem is where anybody goes to show themselves and to get on the scene of, Jewish whatever. And he said, well, you go up to the feast. I'm not yet going up to the feast. My time has not yet fully come. You're free to go. And if you want to go, you can go. But I must be about my Father's business. When Jesus was called before the Sanhedrin, he had healed the man at the pool of Bethesda and told the man to take up his mat and go home. It happened to be the Sabbath. And they were not exactly excited about this man carrying a burden on the Sabbath and breaking the Sabbath. And who is it that made you break the Sabbath? And the man said, well, it was the guy who healed me. And they said, who was that? And he said, well, I don't know. Well, they knew who it was, but they couldn't do anything unless they had a testimony. And then Jesus found him again later, and he says, and Jesus told him, beware, right, that you do not sin, or else a worse thing will come upon you. And the man found out that it was Jesus. He thought they were truly interested in who it was, and so he went and told him it was Jesus. And so now they put Jesus before the tribunal. And they're trying to arraign him for Sabbath breaking, and he says, well, my Father has been working until now, and I've been working. If he stopped working on the Sabbath, you'd all be dead. I don't stop working on the Sabbath either. I don't do the accumulating work, but I do the sustaining work. And when Jesus was with the rabbis, and they accused him of casting out the demons by the prince of demons, and he said, if I cast out the demons by Beelzebub, by whom do your sons cast them out? Therefore they shall be your judge. And when another time, when they thought his disciples were breaking the Sabbath by collecting some grain and rolling it in their hands to get the hull off or the husk off so that they could eat some handfuls of grain, they accused him of Sabbath breaking, and he said, well, the Sabbath was made for man and not man for the Sabbath. Therefore the Son of Man is the Lord of the Sabbath. And he also told them, all too well, you reject the commandments of God that you may keep your traditions. When they were trying to take his life, what did he do? He left and departed. He didn't stay in controversy. He didn't whatever. If they were at the point of taking his life, he was out of there. Not from fear, but it wasn't time yet. And when he was in the Gadarenes, where the demoniacs the demons were cast out of the demoniacs and went into the pigs, and the pig owners came to him, and they didn't want him to stay around. So he got in the boat, and he crossed over and came to his own city. They asked him to leave. He left. And when he was with his disciples, he told them, when they persecute you in this city, flee to another. Right? And when Peter was trying to find out about what was the issue with John and what would happen with him, Jesus said, if I will that he remain until I come, what is that to you? You follow me. And Jesus had some good wisdom along the way. And he spoke the truth to expose the error behind the conflict. That's what he was always doing. He was always exposing the error behind the conflict. And he always maintained healthy boundaries in relation to the Father's call for his life, and he avoided conflict when appropriate, but he faced it when it was needed. Right? He didn't run from it because he was afraid of it, but when it was not appropriate, he would back off and disappear. Now, we can ask ourselves the question, why do we have conflicts? Right? Why do we have conflicts? Well, there's a reason that we have conflicts. Before sin, there was perfect harmony throughout all of God's creation. There were likely different perspectives among the angels, but their different perspectives did not disrupt their harmony. When your attitude is correct, you can peacefully evaluate different perspectives without any conflict. In righteousness, each angel would take responsibility for their own sphere of action, what they think and what they believe and what they choose. And they would operate within that sphere, and they didn't try to take responsibility for or to control somebody else's sphere. And each submitted to the delegated authority of the one or the ones that were over them, exercised in harmony with God's will. And there was no conflict in that atmosphere of perfect righteousness. Beautiful. When conflict began, it was the result of sin. Conflict is not the result of righteousness. And the delusion of sinful nature, the I am God identity, causes us to take responsibility for someone else's sphere of action and therefore to try to control their sphere. You are in conflict internally because you are outside of the law and you are outside of harmony with God. And as a God, you must try to subjugate other gods to your will and your way. And so you do that to God, you do that to people, you do it to animals, and so on. And anyone that does not comply with you must be convinced. They must be coerced or controlled, cast aside, canceled, or just cut off. And with this mindset, you assume that others think the same way that you do and are prone to do to you what you do to them. Therefore, you're always on guard against others, lest they attempt to get into your sphere like you get into theirs. And that is the foundation of conflict. And you can never be at peace unless all competition is eliminated or it's sufficiently less powerful than you so that it's not a threat. So you can never be at peace unless everyone agrees with you. And if there's any disagreement, if there's any differing perspective, or if there's any question, and that is seen as a threat to your position, you react to it as a threat. And this always leaves you in a position of insecurity and reveals the weakness of your position. And this drives you to then use compulsion, coercion, force, manipulation, or lies and slander, cancel culture. Right? We've seen a lot of that. And any other modality that you can think of that will work to maintain your position. And this condition of the human heart becomes manifested in groups. It's manifested in organizations and institutions and societies that are governed by humans with this condition. And so you see this cancel culture. You see this, canceling voices or pushing against things. You see this in all sorts of situations. And of course, over the last few years, we've seen lots of it. We've seen lots of people shut down, accounts shut down, silencing voices, other things of that nature. And it simply shows that the ones who are silencing and canceling have a weak position that cannot stand up against comparison, right? They cannot have free dialogue because their position would be destroyed if there was free dialogue. Okay? So the solution to conflict is a new heart. It's a new nature. And when the Holy Spirit and your will cooperate, by faith, you have access to the nature of Christ. And taking that nature of Christ by faith, you understand that you are a child of God. You are no longer God yourself. God is the one that you're dependent upon. He is the one you bind yourself to by trust. And He is the one that you take from by faith. And His law is the standard that you use to evaluate information by. And your will is submitted to and in harmony with His will. And now you take responsibility for governing yourself seriously. And through the Holy Spirit, you are restored to self-control. And when you have self-control, you don't attempt to control others. And as a child of God, you submit to the limits of your sphere of action given to you by God, and you don't try to control what is in God's sphere of action. You don't try to control what's in others' sphere of action, and you don't surrender your sphere of action to anyone else but God. And He will never take that sphere from you. So the one you surrender it to is the one who will never take it from you. You don't take responsibility for someone else's sphere of action, therefore you have no need to control their sphere. And you're at peace because you're in harmony with God and His law. And you are submitted to God's will and God's way, and you cheerfully deny yourself for the sake of God and others, because you are taking from his self-sacrificing love. Beautiful. And everyone around you is now free to think, to believe, to choose whatever they will, and you have no need to control them. You know that no one could do anything to you except that God gives them permission, and that anything that he permits will work out for good. So you never fear others, and you leave others free just like you are free to govern themselves. You don't see others as competition, but as valuable children of God, whom you have the privilege of working for sacrificially. You don't need others to think like you do. You don't need others to believe what you believe or to make the choices that you would make in order for you to love them and serve them. You are secure in the truth, therefore you are never threatened by alternative perspectives. You're secure when you are in disagreement, when you are in agreement with God, even if the whole world disagrees with you. The solution to conflict is an internal solution, not an external one. Luke 6:31 says, "And as ye would that men should do to you, do ye also to them likewise." When you have full self-control and you have God as your source, you will treat others as you would like to be treated yourself. Until then, good luck. Not happening. How do we deal with sensitive conversations? Somebody wanted me to cover this particular topic, so I put it in this presentation, dealing with sensitive conversations. Now, before starting a sensitive conversation, consider the purpose of communication. In the context of the law of life, taking in order to give, then I communicate with others in order to give them what I have received from God. And I communicate with others to accomplish God's purpose for my life and to work together with others toward common goals. And in an unselfish context, communication with others is a means by which I give love. I give compassion and empathy and understanding to them after I have received those things from God. In a selfish context, however, communication with others is a means by which I try to extract love and compassion and empathy and understanding from others, because I have not taken those things from God. When contemplating starting a sensitive conversation with someone, ask yourself a few questions. Is this conversation for the purpose of receiving something from them, or is it for the purpose of giving something to them? Is it so that I might be relieved of this burden, or is it so that I might help them to be relieved of a burden? Is it so that I might have peace, or is it so that they might have peace? Is it so that I might fix their problem so it doesn't bother me anymore? Or is it that I might cooperate with God in helping them to freedom for their sake? So it is so, is it so that I might not have to work so hard, or is it so that I might accomplish more for the Master together? Right? So that we might accomplish more. In short, is the conversation for me, or is it for them and God's purpose in their lives? If the conversation is for me, don't have the conversation. Right? Don't have the conversation. Have the conversation with God and work it out with Him alone. If the conversation is for them, then come to God and ask Him to give you His Holy Spirit's wisdom so that you can communicate what He would have you to communicate and say it in a way that He would have you to communicate it. Then watch for the time and the circumstances when they will be most receptive and the conversation will be most effective. and rely upon the Lord to help you to understand when that time is, and have the conversation with a genuine interest in their best good. Right? You never want to pressure others. Right? You never want to pressure others. Never argue with others. Never accuse them in the conversation. Simply speak the truth in love and let the Holy Spirit do His work on their heart. It is not your part to convict them or convince them. Your role is simply to communicate with them. It's the Holy Spirit's role to do the convincing and the convicting. Now, what about disagreements? How do you deal with disagreements? Well, if there's a disagreement between you and someone else, then evaluate a few things. Are you at peace? Or are you in the fight or flight mode? Are you open to hear what they are saying so that you can understand their perspective? Or are you defensive? Are you actively listening to them, giving them time to explain their point fully? Or are you cutting them off because you already know what their point is and you already know what they're going to say? Are you feeling and acting like Jesus right now? If you are in that fight or flight mode, if you're defensive, if you're cutting them off, if you're predicting what they'll say, and you're not feeling like acting like Jesus, take a break. It's time for you to take a break. Let the other person know that you want to continue this discussion at a time when it would be most beneficial for the two of you, but now is not that time. So I need to go spend some time with Jesus and surrender my heart to Him and getting His help to change my attitude so that I can continue this discussion with as much love and respect and attention as you deserve. Right? Then do exactly that. Spend time with Jesus and surrender. Review the disagreement with God and ask Him, what was the basis of the disagreement? What was it that they were saying? What was it what they were saying? Was it how they were saying it? Was it what happened before the disagreement started? Was it this reminiscent of how someone used to treat me when I was younger? What principles apply to this situation? Lord, how would you handle this situation? What would you say if you were in this? Why was I in fight or flight mode? What lie am I believing that's making me respond that way? Lord, give me your love and your respect so that I can truly love and respect them when we talk again. And when you know that you are surrendered to God and you can enter the discussion again, this time with the right attitude and with the right spirit, then continue the discussion. Right? Continue the discussion. But what if it's not just a disagreement? What if it's an argument? That doesn't ever happen, does it? None of you have ever been in an argument. It's only me, right? Well, of course, if I was the only one that got in an argument, then I would have to get in an argument with myself. So it has to be somebody else too, so I can blame you as well. Okay. 2 Timothy 2 and verse 23, here's our advice from the Bible. But avoid foolish and ignorant disputes, knowing that they generate strife. So, in dealing with arguments, arguing, what is it? It's an attempt to force or pressure someone else to see things from my perspective. Right? It's trying to get somebody to see things and understand something and believe something from my perspective, and I'm putting force and pressure in order for that to happen. This is different from a discussion, because a discussion can be and is without force. It's without pressure. And a discussion should be conducted for the purpose of helping others and working together towards common goals. Arguments never existed before sin. After sin, it was Satan that argued with God and others, but God never argued back. God never argues back because God never argues. Why doesn't God argue? Because it's sin. God never uses force or pressure. He will discuss, but he will never argue. He will state the truth. He will educate and inspire and warn, but he will never argue. Jesus never argued either. It doesn't matter the position or point you are arguing, if it's correct or not. To argue is wrong and proves that you are wrong, regardless of how valid your point may be. But most people argue a point they believe is correct, while that point is wrong. And some people will even argue points they don't believe, because they like arguing, because they like winning, domineering, putting others down, looking better than others. They're trying to exalt themselves because they have such a low position. This comes, of course, from the I am God identity of our sinful natures. And if you tend to argue with others, recognize you are wrong in doing this. You're wrong. It is not right, even if your position seems to be right. This is a sin that needs to be overcome with the help of God, not continued because you think it's okay. But it isn't the arguing that needs to be stopped as much as the I am God identity that needs to be exchanged with the true identity that I am a child of God. It's a change of heart that is needed rather than a change of behavior, because when the heart is changed, the behavior will change automatically. Right? So we have to begin at the right place. If the behavior is changed without a change of the heart, the behavior will come back at some point. It'll come back. When you find yourself arguing and you recognize it, well, that's the time to stop. Stop right where you are. You can be mid-sentence, and if you recognize where you're at and what you're doing, just stop. In the argument there, excuse yourself. Go and spend time with God. Ask him for forgiveness and a new heart that has no need to argue. And ask God to give you a humble spirit like Christ's humble spirit. And apologize to the ones that you are arguing with, and tell them that by God's help, you will overcome this propensity to argue. And pride hates apologizing. It does. It hates apologizing. And so if you have to apologize, that gives you some reason to pause before you do it again in the future, because you're like, oh no, if I do this, I'm going to have to apologize for this again. And I don't like apologizing. Right? So it's good to apologize. Now, give others the freedom to point out to you when you are arguing, so that you can recognize it better, because they're going to recognize that you're arguing before you recognize that you're arguing. You might think, oh, no, I'm not arguing, I'm just trying to discuss, when you're really in an argumentative mood. And when they do point it out to you, don't resent them for it. They're there trying to help you, and but thank them for helping you to overcome this sin. And then bend your will through faith in God to surrender this trait to God and accept the attitude of Christ in its place. Now, how you respond to others when others try to argue with you. How is it that you respond when they try to argue with you? Well, recognize that they're simply acting out their sinful nature, which they are slaves to. So don't take it personal. All right? They're not currently free to do otherwise, so don't expect them to do otherwise. They need to come to God personally and to accept Christ's nature in exchange for their own nature, and before they can ever stop arguing. And they're not at that place right now, so guess what? It's not going to happen. Now, when they begin arguing with you, turn to God and ask him for wisdom right now. Then listen respectfully, pay attention, ask questions that clarify what they mean by what they say, so that you understand the points that they're trying to make. And then tell them that you would like to be able to think about this for a while before responding. Then take it to God in prayer and ask Him how He would have you to respond. And then choose a time to respond when they are most likely to be most receptive and least argumentative. Right? They want you to understand and to agree with them. So give them every indication that you are sincerely trying to understand them, even if you may not be able to agree with them. And if they recognize that you are actively trying to understand them and you are taking their points seriously, they will be less and less likely to argue their points with you. This kind of response will tend to de-escalate arguments and turn them into discussions. Right? It really helps in the process. A quiet answer turns away wrath. Now, what about false accusations? You've never been accused of anything, right? Yes, let's deal with false accusations. Revelation 12 and verse 10, the accuser of our brethren who accused them before our God day and night has been cast down. Angels who are greater in power and might do not bring a reviling accusation against the unjust before the Lord. Michael the archangel, in contending with the devil when he disputed about the body of Moses, dared not bring against him a reviling accusation, but said, "The Lord rebuke you." And while he was being accused by the chief priests and elders, he answered nothing. So here we see a comparison between two. We have Satan, who is the accuser, and we have the angels, Jesus, who never accuse. So to accuse means to claim that someone has done something wrong, and it can also mean to look for wrong in another so that they can be condemned and claim that they in fact did something deserving of condemnation. And a false accusation is when someone was right, but they are accused of being wrong. And who is the accuser? Well, clearly, it's Satan. And he thinks he is the judge, but he has the wrong perspective, so he accuses falsely. He made many false accusations about God, and guess what? God never responded to the false accusations with truth acclamations. He responded to false accusations with demonstration. God didn't just go back and forth when Satan accused and God says, no, that's not right, this is right, and no, that's not right, this is right, and so on. God demonstrated. God didn't refute the accusations by words. He refuted the accusations by actions. So the proof that Satan was wrong and God was right didn't come from what Satan said versus what God said. It came from what Satan did versus what God did. Heavenly angels, they don't argue. They know they aren't the judge, and they have no inclination to condemn. Jesus didn't accuse, and he was fulfilling the role of a mediator, not of a judge. God will accuse because he is the judge, but God's accusations are always true. They are right. They are not false accusations. They are true accusations. He is seeking to save the sinner, if possible, but in the judgment, he will rightfully claim that you have done wrong. Right? That's true. Now, if angels don't accuse, and Jesus, when he was falsely accused, he remained silent, and if when God accused, he proved the accusations wrong by his actions and not by his words, then how should we respond when we are falsely accused? Don't accuse in return. Right? It doesn't ever work to turn around and accuse in return. Don't answer the accusation in words. Answer the accusation with actions, not words. Live a consistent life. Surrender to and depend upon Christ yourself, and your Christ-likeness in action will disprove the false accusations. If someone accuses me of something, I don't respond. But if someone asks questions, I will answer their questions. Well, a few years ago, somebody had taken some of my sermons, some of my presentations, and they had some issues with some of the things that I had said. And this particular individual was apparently in a church, certain church, in a certain church position, and they had the opportunity of teaching in church, and I think it might have been kind of a Sabbath school type of setting. And what they did for a number of weeks was take my number of my sermons and dissect them and show how they were completely false, and presented lots of different scriptural evidences of why this statement was wrong and that statement was wrong and other things like that. And for like a whole month, the church got educated in why my sermons or my presentations were wrong and how they were off and so on and so forth. And so, somebody found out about it and shared that with me, and I said, okay, that's fine. I mean, somebody can accuse. And I looked through some of the material that they had, and I completely agreed with all of the quotes that they had, but it was very clear that they misunderstood the things that I was saying and the intention of the things that I was saying, and they were twisting words. And, okay, well, and I even had an email conversation back and forth with the individual, a couple times or something like that, but I never responded to any accusations. I didn't respond. I just, thank you. If they had questions, then I was willing to answer questions. I had somebody else that put together however many page paper of similarly of statements made and, those different types of statements. And I wasn't sure. It seemed like it was an accusation rather than a question. And so I just let it be, and they had shared it with a number of other individuals about what they thought was wrong. And so I just let it go. And later, I came to find out that, yes, they made all of these statements, but they were still interested in having a dialogue to understand what I really meant by what I said. And so then we began a dialogue and to communicate and to, start to work through those understandings or those misunderstandings of what they had what they had understood, right? And so I understand that God is the one who is going to resolve the accusations. It's not me. And my reputation belongs to him. And that is his problem to deal with, not mine. My influence is what I think, what I say, what I choose, what I do, and my influence is my responsibility, right? That is my responsibility. So I focus on my influence, and I leave the accusations and the reputation with God to deal with, because that's his issue, right? Now, what about anger and dealing with anger? Putting out anger's fire. Well, let me tell you my story again. Because I come from a background of anger. Addictions, parents divorced, all sorts of issues going up, friends, not friends, and other things. And, when you cannot have victory yourself because of the things that you say and you do, and you're constantly falling into this, and you're struggling with depression and other things like that, then oftentimes that turns into anger as well. And I had an anger that could put holes in walls and that could put holes in doors. And I had an anger that would fly off the handle at, quite little things. And the anger was not manifest very much in relation to my wife or around her, but for some reason, the children just triggered me. I couldn't stand babies crying. And that was just something that, got on my nerves, and I just didn't know if I could handle it. And I was very grateful that my wife was there to help and deal with it. But every once in a while, she wanted to get a break and go somewhere, and I was the one left with the crying baby. And I was, yes, anyways, I was concerned of what I might do to that little thing, because of how frustrated I was and how angry I was in relation to their crying and my inability to keep them from crying. And so I had these significant issues while I was, in my early parenting, and oh boy, there was a lot of that. There was a lot of that, right? And so, wow. Then came the crisis of my life. Then came the time when I was, thinking of leaving my wife, leaving the children, going off and doing my own thing, giving in to the addictions, and, God doesn't work, church doesn't work, all of these different things don't work. Oh, man, they don't deserve to go down this pathway with me. And so it's better for me to leave them and to leave them where they are, and for them to then go with me and to be with me, it'd be better for that to be the case. And so, but then that's where God captured me. And that's where my life began to change, and where it was transformed, and it began to take a different direction. And I finally surrendered to God, and I began to depend upon Him, and my life became more and more like His life, and transformed more and more into His likeness. And yet I still had this anger problem, and my anger was just, it was boom. And I didn't even know that I was getting angry. I would only know when I was angry, right? I'm already yelling, I'm already angry, I'm already whatever, and then I would know that I was angry. And at the time, we happened to be renting a place or staying at a place with another church member in transition to going to the mission field. Well, it turned out to be a year-plus transition. And anyways, they had a good property with some walking trails and so on. And so when I was angry, then I decided what I was going to do is I was going to leave the situation, and I would go and I would take a little vacation. So when I was angry and I blew up and I recognized that I was angry, I would leave and I would go walk. And I would pray, and I would talk with God, and I would talk with Him as long as it took until I wasn't angry anymore, and I could enter back into the situation without blowing up again, or at least I thought I could get back into it without blowing up again. And sometimes those walks and those talks would be 45 minutes. Sometimes it would be an hour before I was calmed down enough where I could think I could get into the situation and then enter that situation and be able to then address the issues that were going on. And now, instead of addressing the issue in full-blown anger, I address the issue in frustration. But at least frustration was better than anger. And so I continued in this process and going out every time that I got angry and walking and talking with God and surrendering these things. And the surrender got faster. And I began to recognize or notice when I was getting angry sooner. Right? I began to see it sooner. I began to notice it sooner. And I would notice that okay, I remember one time when I started escalating and I hit an 8 on the scale of 10. Now, I still went to 10 and I got angry and I blew up, but I actually recognized an 8. And that was wonderful, right? It was wonderful. I actually recognized an 8. And then another time I recognized when I hit a 5. Oh, and that was wonderful. Look, I'm actually getting it earlier. And then I remember when I hit like a 2 another time. And then I got to the point where I started recognizing when I got triggered, right? When the trigger was coming along. And the earlier I caught it in the process, the easier it was to cut it off. I didn't have to go walk as far and as long in order to calm down. And eventually I got to the point where I wasn't blowing up like that anymore. And then the next thing was then with the frustration. And learning to not interact with the children or not discipline the children while I'm still frustrated. But that's a whole other story. But this was with anger. Now we're told in Ephesians 4:31 and 32, it says, "Let all bitterness, wrath, anger, and clamor, and evil speaking be put away from you with all malice, and be kind one to another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another, even as God, for Christ's sake, hath forgiven you." Yeah, beautiful. So remember, everywhere there's a command, it's a promise. So this is not a command, you need to give this away, and you need to be forgiving, and you need to be tender-hearted. No, it's a promise that He will give you the ability to put that away, and He will give you the tender-heartedness and the forgiveness. In Proverbs 10 and verse 12, it says, "Hatred stirs up strife, but love covers all sins." Beautiful, yeah? Love covers all sins. So anger is typically a response to injustice. That's usually the underlying issue. And selfishness gets angry because the injustice negatively affects me. That's why I'm angry, because it affects me. And selfish anger is always the result of a belief in a lie. The injustice was done to me, and it negatively affects me. Selfishness gets angry because selflessness, unselfishness, gets angry because the injustice affects others, including God. Jesus' anger in the temple was not for Himself. It was for others. Right? In human history, there are rare instances of selfless anger. Jesus, of course, was one. Moses at the golden calf was another. Examples of selfless anger. If you are angry, it is safe to assume it is selfish. Right? If you are angry, it is safe to assume it's a selfish anger. And when you're angry, if possible, separate yourself from the situation and go to a place where you can be alone with God. And if you're with others and you need some space, just tell them, "I need to go to the bathroom," and then go there. Right? Most everybody's going to let you go. If you got a bathroom need, they're going to let you go. Right? And so you go there. I, again, went outside and spent time alone with God. And you can ask yourself while you're sitting on the throne of injustice, right? You can ask God, what injustice do I think is being done to me right now? Why is it that I'm responding with anger? Why do I believe that it's being done to me? Right? And help me to see it from the perspective of the truth. And help me to apply the truth to the error right now. So, what is the truth? The truth is you don't belong to yourself. It's not done to you. It's not about you. It's not personal. And the truth is that it could only come out of them if it were in them, and so the injustice problem is their problem, not your problem. But sinful nature believes that I am God. Therefore, I am my own. And I see that the things are done to me. And so I take it personally. And I make it my problem. And then I have to try to fix my problem. And to fix my problem, I have to control everything outside of me. But I can't. I can't control anything outside of me. Therefore, I get stressed. Right? Stress is the result of the failure to control what you cannot control. And if I feel helpless, if I feel vulnerable, and if I feel whatever, I am going to get angry as a self-defense mechanism. Or if I think by being angry I can control the situation or I can fix the situation, then I'll get angry in an attempt to control. Now, the solution is to believe that I am a child of God, that God controls all things, He controls things always, and He has my best interests in mind. I am never helpless, I am never vulnerable when God is my defense. Never. And I never need to control the situation around me, for God already controls it. And He only calls me to control myself with His help. So now, I don't have a reason to be angry. I have no reason to be angry. I can trust God in all circumstances. I can let Him be the judge, and He can deal with the injustices in my life, and I can be at peace. Isn't that nice? Yeah, it's nice. But all right, that's dealing with the anger inside. What if you're dealing with others that are around you that are angry? How do you deal with them? Well, pray and ask God to help you and to give you His Spirit, which is calm and is wise. Right? And recognize that they are acting in harmony with their sinful nature, and that sinful nature is holding them captive. So they're not free right now. Be patient, be calm, trust God, and as you take His love from Him, and you have His love, manifest that love to others. Because anger is a response to injustice for the sake of self-protection, and or to control the situation, if you respond to someone's anger in a way that is perceived as unjust or threatening, their anger will only get worse. So if you get defensive, if you get angry, if you make accusations, you're only going to add fuel to the fire, and the whole situation is going to get worse. So, be calm. Listen with attention. Don't appear to attack them in any way. We're told in Proverbs 15:1, a soft answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up what? Stirs up anger. Yeah. Harsh words stir up anger. Have you ever been in that situation? You've been around and maybe you were the one that was angry and somebody else's harsh word just made your anger worse. Or maybe they were the one that was angry and you responded kind of harsh and it just went now you had World War III. Yes, it's important what you say and how you say it. So when somebody else is angry with you, hear them out, right? Listen to them. Maintain eye contact. That's going to be an important thing. Take an interest in what they are saying. Even if it doesn't make sense to you, or you know it is exaggerated and it's not true, still take interest in what they're saying. I have had interesting conversations with patients that were in psychiatric conditions, and they have all sorts of interesting things to tell you. And they think they're going to be president of the United States, or they think that they're Jesus Christ, or they think they have some mission to do this, that, or the other thing, and they're going to be the holy crusader for this and that and whatever, and they have all sorts of very interesting ideas. Well, you take interest, you listen to what they're saying, and then when there's the time for the break, You excuse yourself to the bathroom. When you're with somebody that's angry, use disarming statements like, from what I've heard, what you've told me, I can understand why you would feel that way. Yeah, that's understandable. I can understand how difficult that could be. Oh, that must have made you really upset. Oh, I know you don't want to feel like this. You just can't help it. If you need to vent, you can vent now as long as you need to. If someone is angry at you and making accusations to you, it isn't helpful to explain yourself in the moment unless they ask you specific questions. Because if you try to explain your side of the issue when they are accusing you, but they haven't asked for questions, that is oftentimes defending yourself. It's being defensive, and when you're defensive in the midst of a situation like that, it doesn't turn out well. So if they're making accusations, simply focus on letting them know that you understand why they would feel like they do. And explanations and clarifications can come after they have calmed down, not when they're at the height of the emotions. So pray and ask for God's intervention to bring an atmosphere of peace into the situation, and cooperate with the Holy Spirit's leading in that situation. And by the end, the other person will be calmed down, and then you can have a productive discussion at that point. And with a calm spirit from God, you have helped your brother through a difficult situation. Praise God. And you put water on the fire. I had a situation at a hospital once, and it was quite a hairy situation. A patient was not getting some of the treatments that the family members thought that they should, and a big, burly family member came in, and he was yelling at the nurses, and they finally called me. I wasn't involved in the situation, but they called me to come up and deal with the person, and I came in the room, and he's towering over me, and he's angry as can be, and he wants to force. He's using anger to force, to control the situation so that his loved one can get the particular care that they thought needed to be. And boy, I wasn't sure if he was going to take my face and smash it backwards. He was really angry, but I maintained eye contact. I listened to him. I reflected back. Well, yes, I can understand how you would be angry, why you would feel that way, and so on, and those types of situations. And it was one of the times where I really thought whether I was going to get taken out by a patient. But I remained calm through that situation, and it was probably 20, 30 minutes before his tone of voice started coming down, and by the end of the conversation, we could have a calm discussion with each other. It took time. It wasn't easy, and if I would have risen at all in that situation, he would have put me down. And it wouldn't have been lovely, right? So, yes, the fire can be put out, but you got to have your fire put out before you can help others put their fire out. You can't give what you don't have. So come to God first, take of that peace, and then you can give it to others in resolving conflict.